Okay, let's do this. So first I need to tell you who I am. I'm Dr. Lindsay Doe.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a clinical sexologist, which today means to me that I dedicate my entire professional life and most of my personal life to educating myself about sexuality and sharing it with others. Not most of my personal life.
I was going to say.
Okay, so today it means that I dedicate all of my professional life, some of my personal life, to learning about sexuality and sharing that knowledge with others.
I feel like that's accurate.
Okay, good. We've got that. Check. Number 1. Random fact about me comes from this friend in high school. He told me that we were playing football outside in this field, and the ball accidentally hit me in the chest, and I shouted, "Ah, my breast!" And one of the teachers shouted my name to kind of scold me for my language, and I reprimanded back that it was indeed my breast, that I was using proper anatomical terms.
How old were you?
Probably 15.
Okay, yeah.
Go me.
Yeah, go you.
I love hearing that I was sex positive, even in my youth.
Well, also a different attitude towards authority than I would have had. And good for that. Good job.
Yeah. 5 stars.
Yes.
Okay, next. My current curiosity, and I would love to know our guest hosts as well, is what kind of sex education the Obama daughters get from their parents. Do you have a current curiosity? Do you have a current curiosity?
I am curious as to what makes people good at things.
Aww.
I am. Like, I'm having this whole thing where I'm rediscovering my love of playing guitar. And it's amazing to me how much I've fallen off because I haven't played in a long time. And I'm just wondering, like, what makes people good at something for a really long time. They don't have to relearn it every couple of years, but maybe it's everything. But so that's my curiosity right now.
That's so beautiful. I like it. Endurance. Okay. All right. So I don't know how you'll cut all of that in. And hello to the audience, by the way. Yes, I'm talking with Nick. Nick is the guest host, and I'm going to introduce him right now. We are in the Holy Fucking Science podcast studio. I'll show you.
I feel like we might be missing some kind of like very, very beginning hello and welcome to this Explanations podcast thing. So you just started with, I'm Lindsay Doe.
Yeah.
Didn't I start earlier? Or it was like, Explanations podcast, episode 1.
Were we rolling for that?
I don't know.
Callie? Callie is our sound person.
We were, but I'm not entirely positive.
Well, I think it's also a good idea for you to just introduce what the podcast is.
Okay, we're going to introduce what the podcast is.
Okay.
The jingle doesn't do that?
The jingle will happen, and then you'll be like,
oh, the jingle will happen.
Welcome to the Sexplanations podcast. This is the podcast about Sexplanations.
Welcome to the Sexplanations podcast episode 1. Welcome to the Sexplanations podcast episode 1. Here we go. I'm Lindsay Doe. I'm Dr. Lindsay Doe, and this is Sexplanations podcast episode 1.
Wow. That's good luck, Callie.
Welcome to the Sexplanations podcast episode 1, where we take the show Sexplanations and we turn it into a verbal version. We talk about what happened in previous episodes. We talk about what's happening in sex now. We have an amazing guest host.
Let's set the bar a little lower than amazing.
Oh no.
I am a guest host.
You are amazing. You're the most requested person. Who are you? Here, I'm going to tell you who you are.
No, it's a secret.
No, I love this. Today I'm joined by director, producer, videographer, editor, Nicholas Jenkins, the very first person to put me in front of a camera and say, let's talk about sex. Oh, we're going to visit this, what do we have? Oh yeah, we're going to revisit the first time in my office by watching that episode on the YouTube show Sexplanations that we launched 4 years ago. We're going to talk about what we've learned since. We're going to talk about what we've learned since, share some personal stories, and generally have a silly time getting smarter together.
Hopefully so. Yes.
Those are my goals.
Good goals.
Do you have any you want to add?
I really want to get more of a perspective from you of what that whole beginning journey was like.
So fun. I don't think we've ever talked about the how we met story.
Not really,
Mm.
no. And I don't, but also just like the day of, like being on set that first day. So today we're going to talk about that first episode.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're going to talk about. And you can go and watch it and we're going to talk through some of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that I really wanted to do this was because I know what I was thinking, what I was feeling and everything, but I've always wanted to know what Lindsay was thinking and feeling. And now that Lindsay and I are good friends and we hang out all the time, it's funny because we don't really talk about that too much.
No. I mean, we still talk about sex, but not necessarily.
Yeah, but not about that first episode and sort of what it was like to work with someone for the first time like that. And I don't know, I'm fascinated to go back and think about that. So that's why I'm here.
Any other information that you think our audience should have about you in terms of what you bring to the table?
I mean, just a little more background on me. I'm a filmmaker and I'm a senior producer for Crash Course and do a lot of things with Hank.
Who the F is Hank?
Who the F is Hank? Hank is a very thin layer of soap that accumulates on your bathtub.
Oh, Nerd Fighters just got so happy.
And I'm the editor for Dear Hank and John podcast. And yeah, I do different stuff on the internet.
And you play the guitar.
I do.
And you're a dad to a corgi.
Scared me for a second there.
And your dad.
She's not who I thought I was. Yeah, I have a wonderful corgi named Abby, who is my best friend.
Aw, that's cute. Okay, so let's see. Can I just go into sponsorship?
I feel like there should probably be some kind of like.
Yeah, typically the way it would work is you would say, before we get rolling into the meat of things here, we have to talk about our sponsor, and our sponsor for this week is the wonderful, I think it's Adam and Eve this week, right?
We have Patreon at the beginning.
Okay.
And we have Adam and Eve at the end.
I think it's good for you to just say, we got some housekeeping. First, we want to talk about our Patreon, blah, 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 blah. And then at some point you'll have to, eventually this will all become organic and you'll know where to go, but it's important that the host leads us through that.
But I have to do the introduction. The jingle won't do it for me.
I think it'll feel less like a smooth experience all the way through. If it's basically you're lubing up the audience for the jingle to come in.
Yep.
Oh, let's lube you up for this jingle. All right. Well, Nick, before we get to talking, all right, Nick. So before we get to talking, I want to share some information about our sponsor with our audience. Then the jingle plays. Or do I have to end it hard?
I mean, I think you're fine to just talk.
I love all the... We just need this side voice that just says, that's what she said. That's what she said over and over. Okay. Do I have to end it hard? Or can it like go into the jingle? Could I say...
I think you were fine to stop where you stopped and then have the jingle come in. I think you're going to be fine with that.
Callie, you're okay? Okay. So now I can move on, or I need to do it again?
Maybe do it one more time for safety.
Okay. Nick, before we go into the episode, I would love... Or what are we going into? A conversation? Our sex positions? Yeah. Nick, before we talk about our sex positions, our positions intellectually on Sexplanations, the show, and what's going on in the sex world outside of the show, I want to introduce our audience to our first sponsor.
Then jingle?
Okay, jingle.
Money!
Okay, here we go. Can I say it? Yeah, sure. This is who it's by. I'm just going to say. The show is brought to you in part by our extraordinary patrons on patreon.com/sexplanationspodcast. These sexplanauts are like business partners. They help us make quality sex education accessible and improve sexual literacy. I'd like to give shout outs to those pledged at the boss level, Laura Schuster, Donna Flint, and the Millers.
Sweet.
Do you think it's called Sexplanations Podcast?
Did you
On
set
Patreon?
Patreon?
I did.
Did you set it as Sexplanations Podcast?
It should be that. Patreon.
You can't jump these things on me.
Okay.
I don't know.
People who are watching live, can you tell me if it's set to Explanations Podcast? Blah, 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 Patreon pitch.
The page you requested does not exist.
But I think that's because it doesn't have enough patrons yet.
Well, they have to be able to go there to be a patron.
So then where are they going if they're not going to Sexplanations Podcast? Because that's the name of it.
What did you say?
Sexplanations Podcast.
I'm looking at the evidence that is not true.
Okay, I go to log in.
It's a separate Patreon from
Sexplanations.
the other one?
Yeah, it's a Sexplanations Podcast, creating weekly sex edutainment for your something. ...
I type in sexpla, all I get is sexplanations. I get nothing else.
It must not be live, maybe?
I don't understand how you're having patrons if it's not live.
Because you can send a link to them.
Okay.
Okay. Michael, do you know how to turn on the Patreon page? Did those of you in the live stream love being entertained by our confusion and mystery? I'm just going to go with that's what it's called.
We can make a
So
correction.
it
And we'll
looks
just turn it on by...
Your Sexplanations podcast can be found at patreon.com/user U equals 6297754.
Yeah, it's not turned on.
Should
It
probably
must
get that,
not be turned on.
should probably get that turned on. But you can
But I
do
don't
that.
know how.
Well,
Well,
we can figure that out after the podcast.
it's active,
And it's probably... Look,
but I'm assuming there's a setting somewhere that lets you customize your URL that you have not
look at
done
my
yet.
boobs.
The problem is that Sexplanations podcast is kind of long, and it might not be a problem, but if it's longer than Patreon allows URLs to be, if you say Sexplanations podcast as the URL in this episode, there is a chance that we'll go try to set it to that later, and it'll be like, this is too long, and then we've recorded the wrong thing.
I mean, it's fine. I've heard plenty of podcasters go on and make corrections the week after, or even on their social media and stuff. So it's not the end of the world. As we know it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been calling it Sex Pod. Well, we need to figure that out. What should we do?
You need to. Sexpod sounds great. You need to go to patreon.com, log in, and make it live. Or, you know.
We'll do that. We'll figure that out. We've got this, yeah? Do you need me to do the sponsorship plug again?
No, I don't think so.
You're looking at Michael. We need you to be the person we look at. Okay, so with every sponsorship that we do for, what is this one called? This one, for every testes sponsorship that we do, it comes with a test question, a multiple choice sex question. This week, according to state policies on the sex education in schools, how many states in the US don't require sex ed to be taught in their public schools?
Okay, there was a lot of back and forth there. So how many states?
Let me see if I can reword this better. According to state policies on sex education, how many states in the US don't require sex ed to be taught in their public schools?
Okay, so out of 50, how many say, oh, you don't have to do that?
Yes, so here are the options.
Okay, it's multiple
A,
choice. A,
A, 0,
Mhm.
B, 9, C, 17, or D, 26.
I'm going D.
You're correct!
Yeah, because we're terrible.
Boo.
Yeah, we're awful. So
Yeah, that's more than half of our country.
Yep.
Does not have required sex education in the public school system.
yep. We did an episode, the sex maps,
Mm-hmm.
where we broke that down, and it even made you sad because you had to draw out all the maps.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was rough
it was.
to see which states you don't have to have medically accurate sex education. So
Yep.
we're going to provide you with sex education, but it's going to tell you that condoms cause sexually transmitted infections, or that HIV is something you can acquire from a gay person.
Right. Yeah. I remember that very clearly because it was one of those times where I became very aware of how much how much more affected by visual information I am. And so having it on those maps was just like, oh my God. Like when you really play it out. We just had a thing for Crash Course about just our overall channel. Like our friends at YouTube gave us a bunch of graph breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And initially I would have said, graphs, I don't want to look at it, whatever. And then when I saw how the audience was breaking down in graphs and over time and everything, it was like really set in a lot of information about the channel. And it's the same thing with the maps. Like I started to have a deeper understanding. You start to sort of see problems appear in this. And I don't know how much of that is, what are those, the ink blot tests? Rorschach tests. I don't know how much of that is, my own psychology going into it. But at the same time, it was startling when I saw it laid out visually.
Pause, note. Where I say you could get HIV from a gay man, that has some truth to it. So don't put that part in. It's not that a gay man equates to HIV.
The fear being that
Yes.
straight people are like, oh, sitting next to a gay guy is
Right.
HIV.
Well, and also the prevailing theory of the 80s, which was that's where you got HIV.
Who's Large Hadron Colder?
Don't know. Why?
She may also not know how to turn on the Large Hadron
Collider?
What's a Large Hadron Collider?
The Large Hadron Collider is what is it in Switzerland? It's in Switzerland, and it's the thing that they shoot particles around really fast and then explodinate them.
Oh.
So
Giant particles.
yeah,
Like
so that's how they figure out things.
miles and miles huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what you guys are talking about, but it sounds really fun.
I think if you can go back and do the your Patreon shout out thing, if you want the URL to be SexPod, is the one that you said was Sexplanations Podcast.
Just in case.
Oh, do a second one so that depending on what it ends up being, you have options.
Did you just say that you wanted it to be SexPod?
No, I was saying that that's an option because I think that colloquially we're going to call the show Sex Pod. But I think that so I did a poll and people said we want it to be called Sexplanations Podcast because they want to maintain the branding.
Well, I mean,
they being Patreon people.
Yeah. There are a few, I mean, because like Do Go On, I think theirs is just Do Go On Pod. So you could still call it Sex Pod on Patreon if you need to have it shorter. But again, I feel like these are things that...
I'm going to do it.
Okay, go.
So we have an option. This show is brought to you in part by our extraordinary patrons. Patrons. This show is brought to you in part by our extraordinary patrons on This show is brought to you in part by our extraordinary patrons on patreon.com/sexpod. These sexplanauts are like business partners. They help us make quality sex education accessible and improve sexual literacy. I'd like to give a special shout out to those pledged at the boss level, Laura Schuster, Donna Flint, and the Millers.
Thank you, Millers.
Thank you, Millers.
A whole family.
They're so great to us.
Oh, are
my
they?
Gosh, it's amazing.
Lovely.
Yes. Okay, so more than half of the states in our country do not have to teach public sex education.
Right, and that was one of the questions too, is like, what is it better to have no sex ed or bad sex ed?
I know, I still don't know that answer.
Yeah.
So, here we go. Oh, see, this is where I was going to introduce you.
Well, now I've already been introduced.
See, I'm going to say, on that depressing note.
Here's a depressed person.
No, you're somebody who makes me smile every time I see him.
You know, it's funny if we made Michael Aranda laugh.
Really? I feel like he laughs all the time.
Just laugh at anything.
I'm selective.
I'm going to tell them your middle name.
Okay.
Nicholas Gandalf Jenkins. Sexplanations now has a podcast. This is our first episode, and I've invited you to kick off the show for 2 reasons. 1, because we did Sexplanations together. We know what this is like, the process of getting to know someone and deciding whether or not they're a safe person to talk about sexuality with. And 2, because you have a damn sexy voice.
Ooh.
That was awesome. Yeah, when you would come on to Sexplanations and sit with me on the couch, or when you did the identity episode, people would write in the comments about how they wanted you to do a narration for their lives.
I've always wanted to do more voice work. So I started out at my first job was as a DJ, on-air DJ, not a mobile DJ, on-air DJ. And I loved it. It was a really gratifying thing, but it's not unless you end up syndicated around the country, it's not a well-paying job. So I went off for the things, but I've always wanted to go back to it for some reason. I like talking. I like hearing myself talk. It's great.
I like hearing you talk. So let's do this. We're going to call this segment Sex Positions, because the intent is to go through in chronological order the Sexplanations episodes and kind of critique them.
Sure.
Take a stance, take a position on them. So do we watch it? Can we watch it right now? Should we pretend like we watched it?
I would say that we just watch it. I mean, I recently watched it, so
okay.
I wouldn't want to waste people's time by going over it.
If you want to watch it now to prep yourself to be able to talk about it, that's fine, as long as you don't talk about it while it's playing, because that would be a mess to edit in audio later.
The podcast will not only be on YouTube live streaming. We are going to have this beautifully cut by the awesome team of Cinema Studios, and then it will air probably on the 9th of June as part of our big anniversary celebration, and I will announce all the information about it in the next episode of Sexplanations YouTube show versus Sexplanations podcast, also known as SexPod. Is there a possibility of taking the script of episode 1 and reading it and cutting it in with actual episode 1, like doing a little montage?
I'm a little bit fuzzy on this.
Because, so one of my intentions with the podcast was that we have all of this content, and I want to get it to more people who don't sit down and watch Sexplanations, but would listen to it.
Right. So like when
in
you're
the auditory version.
When you're watching a movie review and then they cut and they say, and then there's this part where Wonder Woman picks up a tank, and then they cut to the shot where Wonder Woman picks up a tank. So when we're talking about this, and then I talk about when Lindsay made this, really bad joke about Mario's pants.
It was not a bad joke. It was an excellent joke. It's my favorite joke.
When Lindsay made her favorite joke about Mario and the Mario pants, and then you would just cut to that so you could hear it. So I think that's what you're talking about in terms of a montage. Like we'll be talking about it, and then you'll cut to hear parts of the actual episode. Yes? Yes
and no. I mean, part of it is that I just take the script and I rewrite it so that it's all auditory.
Mm-hmm.
And then I either read it, or if the content is good enough to just be played, then we would just play it.
So are you going to put an entire episode of Sexplanations into the podcast?
If you think it's a good idea. Because they're only 4 minutes. The podcast is 45. And then people are getting that information. Like, think about how most of our audience hasn't seen these beginning episodes. But if you think it's dumb.
If I listen to podcasts.
Yes.
I would not put up with that.
Okay. So just refer to it, and then they'll go and watch it / listen to it.
That's my attitude.
How I'm leaning. Also, if you rewrite the episode for a non-visual platform, it'll be harder to critique your execution of the video.
Yeah.
Because then you have your video version and your podcast version, And in the podcast, even though they heard the podcast version, you're talking about what you didn't like about your performance in the video, right?
Yeah.
Can you still do a montage though of like best moments from the episode?
Are you providing me with the moments from the episode you want in the montage, or?
I can. Or you can pick them depending on what you want to be in there.
I think this is a little bit of an administrative meeting conversation
Okay.
that we should have after you record this.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
How are you able to make noise if you're off?
I say that all the time.
Matthew is critiquing us. He says it feels very weird and too much behind the scenes.
What?
Matthew.
Oh, you're live streaming. I forgot.
Yes. Matthew, go do your
He's
work.
just like under the couch.
I was like, we're wired.
Okay. So, montage of the episode. What do you think?
It's actually one of my favorite videos I've ever made for anything that I've done
Ever?
here. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's the most freeform. Like, we had no script,
Right.
really. I think maybe we had some bullet points, but generally it was legitimately just a chance for us to get to know each other, how we worked, and then get some good footage for a first episode. So I was really out of my comfort zone. Because
I didn't know
I am very structured. I don't do doc filmmaking. I do very rigorous narrative stuff, and that translates to camera as well. I like to have camera locked down, and so this was very much a lot of freedom, a little bit of nerves to go in and try to get to know the person I was going to be working with, ostensibly, and try to get really nice footage, but do it in a way that you felt comfortable with me, and in a way that I was happy with what we were getting. So it was really, that was probably one of the more adventurous things I'd ever done in terms of video making and filmmaking. And so that was really cool. At the time, it was scary because I didn't know, like, since I'd never done this, I wasn't aware of what I was going to get. And that made me nervous because I like to know generally what I'm going to get. But no, I had a really good time. And then there are things that I catch now that I wouldn't do if I had to do it all over again. But like, I'm very proud of that first thing, because I felt like we did a good job of capturing you and capturing sort of how I envisioned sexplanations in terms of visual language, and using that space that we had, which is your office. And it was, so yeah, I'm very proud of that first episode. Like, mainly because, not because I think it necessarily broke new ground online or, had a million hits or anything like that, but because it allowed me to stretch my legs and get to know somebody in a new way, which I hadn't done before. So yeah, I really like that first episode.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear, because I wonder how it was for you to, have this new person to work with, and she's talking about sex without any social regulation, and showing you around and being silly. And I definitely did not know what I was doing. It was the first time that a lens was in my face for that period of time. And when you showed me the cut, I just remembered like this ear-to-ear smile of just, wow, how did he do it? How did he, create this Lindsay Doe that could then go out to the public, and hopefully the audience that Hank Green was providing us was going to trust her, that she could speak about sex in a fun way, in a trustworthy way. I think you did a great job. I do remember from that episode that I had longer hair in the back, like a mullet going on. And
You did.
And I didn't have time to get it cut because we were just like putting things together so quickly. And so I tried to use bobby pins and pin it up, and it didn't work. And so now every time I watch, I'm like, oh yeah, that there is a younger me who was just doing the best that she could and having fun. And I'm so glad that you captured the playfulness of that, and that got to be the brand of Sexplanations, that it's not this uptight clinical model, but it's, really joyous and free and,
Well, and that was the other thing was, you know me really well now, and I'm not a playful person. Like, I am very, like, I don't like to be silly. And so that was a real interesting thing for me to do as well, was being a part of a channel that was dealing with serious things, that was also not taking itself too seriously. It was being playful and being fun. And so I got to, especially for that, I don't know how long we were in the office for that episode, probably 45 minutes to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I got to just be playful, and it was fun. And that was not something that I was used to doing. And there was, it had its own pressures. Like, there was the pressure of, like, I want to start this new show, and I want to make sure Lindsay looks good, and, everything is going to work. But there was also less pressure in a lot of respects. Like, working on Crash Course, there are a lot of different pressures sort of coming at me in a lot of different directions. And in this one, it was very straightforward, that it's just like, I want to try to create this new thing and see if it works. So the pressure was more, is this going to work? And I had already dealt with that with SciShow and Crash Course. So I was used to sort of dealing with that pressure of, like, well, okay, hopefully this is going to be successful, but I'm going to go in and just do the best I can, and had a really good time. So what I'd like to know is, and this is really important to me, what did you feel like when we were in there? And I had a camera on you, and we were talking, and then you were talking about sex with this, with this pretty much stranger in the room.
Bearded man.
I wasn't bearded at the time.
That's true.
I might have had a goatee. I don't remember now, but we'd have to watch the Hank's channel video we did at Makeout Point.
We should put some words around that. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So on June 9th, we were, the night before launching the show, we went up to what's called Makeout Point in Missoula, a mountaintop that overlooks the Lake of Lights, or our city. And we celebrated with Hank. That was Nick, Hank, and I.
And Abby.
And
my corgi, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, June 9th, 6/9. And then the following day, June 10th, we launched episode 1. And to answer your question about whether or not, or to answer your question about what that felt like, I think I have to go into almost every situation feeling confident about my ability to talk about sexuality with a person and just trust that they can handle it. And if they can't, then I pull back. But it's not often that I will go in slowly. I think I like to have people meet me where I am, and then once I know where they are, go toward them. If that makes sense?
I think it makes sense to me, but I think you could unpack that a little bit.
Okay. So, well, you and I had met a couple days, or you and I had met about a month before then, when we were gearing up to do the show.
Yeah.
And you're very clearly an incredibly professional person. There was no intimidation present on you, like, oh, this person, she has her doctorate, or she's going to talk about sex, or she's a woman, or any of those things that could be put on me. You were so professional, and you came to the office and you were ready to go, and you guided me, right? You understood that I didn't know what I was doing, that I'm the new person on set, and really simultaneously gave me encouragement to be free in what I wanted to do and how I wanted to express it, at the same time guiding me in that process and saying, okay, this is what your intent is. Here is the impact on it, and how can we get it so that your intent matches the impact, so that the audience understands you for what you're trying to say. And you did that repeatedly from episode 1, minute 1, all the way through in those 2 years that we got to work together.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. I never, ever, ever felt like this person is a threat to me. He doesn't care about what we're doing. That he is a hypocrite, right? And he's helping me create this really honest information about sexuality, but in his personal life, he's being a jerk. Like at all moments, I recognized Nick has integrity. Nick has this channel's best interest in mind, and he is going to help me be the best host for it I can.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess one of the things that has always occurred to me when doing something like that, especially because we're going in to talk about sex, was I wanted to make sure that at no point did you ever feel in any kind of way threatened.
I didn't.
Good. Because I mean, that is a big deal to me. Like, wanted to make sure you felt free and safe, because it's, you know, a person you don't know very well, regardless of gender, the person you don't know very well going into your personal space, your office, and then, you know, that could get a little, you know, I'm not saying it could devolve into anything, but it could make you feel, you know, wary. Yeah. And so was my biggest thing is like, always make sure Lindsay feels comfortable.
Aww. So, well, it would totally change the dynamic had there been any fear that you weren't going to take my voice and communicate it correctly, or if you know, had some judgment toward me that could come across in the way that you edited. I don't think that the content we created, what we made together, would have been what it is.
I think that's fair. But yeah, I love that episode. There are a lot of other ones, I think, as you go through this, that I really like the topic of whatever we're doing, but that's the one that I sort of hold in a special place, because it allowed me to do a lot of experimentation, which at the time was super important to me, because Hank was giving me an opportunity to experiment. And Michael Aranda had started the Brain Scoop, and it was sort of the attitude of like, I want to do something like that. And the idea of a channel about sex, that's great. I'm into sex education, and I want people to be more educated about not just sex, but everything, but, you know, sex, I feel like is really important. And the idea that you were also an educator, who had worked in the same university that I had worked in. And so we had some commonalities there.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. A lot of things we talked about. It was sort of the best case scenario for risk for me, because I could experiment. I felt empowered to experiment, especially in that first episode, to see, well, that worked, that didn't work, this, you know, let's move this around. And we definitely overshot. There was a lot we didn't use. But yeah, I really loved being there. And it was one of those things I just always wanted to know, like, were you having a good time? Were you stressed? Were you, I mean.
Oh, I'm sure there was some stress.
Sure.
Just doing a new behavior like this podcast. I don't know how to do a podcast. I've never done one. There's some stress to it, but I get to have fun making it, because the people around me are very supportive and letting me figure that out, and then cutting it together in ways that are graceful, and the fear of what it's going to be is so much smaller because I have models for how it's been done.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, the only sex channels I had watched, I think Lacey's, and then maybe one other, I'm not really sure. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember those were very much vloggy style, and they weren't a show necessarily. Not meaning that to cut down what Lacey was doing. It's just, they were different types of things. So I felt like I was doing something kind of new, and that was exciting. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time. And, you know, if you had to do it over again, if you had to start from scratch, you know, some mystical thing happens and, you know, tabula rasa, nobody remembers anything. What would you do differently? Or would you do anything differently for that first episode?
I would have gotten a haircut.
I can see that.
I would have gotten a haircut. I'm glad actually that I didn't understand the world of writing scripts at that time, because I do like how freeform it was. No. My
big lesson from that and the next two episodes was take more time for sound.
Oh, yeah.
So that first episode, though, I think we did a good job of masking it, but you were wearing a lot of jewelry, which is strange because you don't normally wear a lot of jewelry.
I think the mic was
It was actually,
necklace.
we had nowhere to clip it where your necklace wouldn't collide with it.
Uh-huh.
And then you said, well, why don't I just clip it to the necklace right here? And I was like, fine.
And you weren't like, why don't you just take the necklace
Yeah.
off?
Because I didn't know you at the time. I thought, well, maybe this is a big part of who she is, jewelry. And the issue is, of course, the other thing is, for those of you techie people, we were shooting on a Canon 7D, my personal Canon, which you couldn't monitor sound. All you could do was sort of look at the levels and go, looks right. So I didn't know that it was picking up the jangle of the necklace a little bit. You know, I'm not inherently a sound guy. So
I think it's beautiful and wonderful. And on the topic of the necklace, there were, I think, 4 charms on it that I had just strung together that day. One from my childhood best friend, one from my brother, I think one from each parent. And so, you know, there's a sweetness to that jingle that interrupted your sound perfection. Like I had my people with me. Yeah.
That would be the only thing that I would change, though. I mean, and even at that, I wasn't really upset by it. I was just sort of like, that's something I shouldn't do, and now I know. If I had been monitoring sound, I immediately would have gone, oh no, we can't do that. But wasn't monitoring sound. So, and I want it to be very clear that it was incapable of monitoring sound. There's no headphone jack coming out of a Canon 7D. I'm doing the best I could.
You did a great job, Nick.
Thank you. You also did a great job. It was a wonderful episode that I'm still proud of to this day.
Okay. So we're going to do another message from a second sponsor.
Hit me.
This is a segment called Main Squeeze because as a group, we're all going to do kegels together, which are exercises that strengthen the pubococcygeus muscles.
Girl, I know what kegels are.
I'm telling our audience, man.
Okay.
We want them to know that they're doing the right thing. You're not going to pee, but you're going to squeeze your muscles that would stop you from urinating if you were, and then release and squeeze and release and squeeze. And we're going to do this by the sound of the moan. So I'm going to read through our sponsorship plug, and every time you hear a moan, you're going to squeeze and release. Okay?
Got it.
All right. Do I need to do that explanation again? Or you're good?
Sounded fine to me.
Yeah, sounded good to me.
Okay, good. Here we go. AdamandEve.com is an AdamandEve.com is an online superstore for adult shoppers. Did I say moan? That we're going to do moan?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to get the sound recordings of a moan. I'm not going to make them. And I'll just pause, and then you can cut them in. Does that work? Awesome. That sells dildos, butt plugs, vibrators, lube, condoms, and sex swings, all at affordable prices. Now just clench your PCs and hold without releasing while I tell you their awesome deal for you. At adamandeve.com, you can use the discount code DOE to get 50% off an eligible item plus free shipping anywhere in the US or Canada. Okay, release. Now a few more. Clench, hold, release, clench, hold, release, clench, hold, release. How's your pelvis?
I have to pee.
Not yet, Nick.
Okay.
I want to hear some of your personal anecdotes around the topic of meeting someone new and talking to them about sex.
I think it's a really weird thing for me because I don't have much of a filter. I mean, I do. I'm perfectly capable of functioning in an office, and it's, you know, I'm not like dangerous for an HR department, but I'm pretty good at judging the room, so to speak, and judging the person I'm talking to. And once I've gotten to know that person, I'm fine communicating with them about anything. Like, I don't really have any things that I will not talk about. You know, so in some respects, getting to sit down and chat with somebody very openly about sex, about controversies, and being able to learn. Like, this is one of the things, if I can't talk about it with people, how am I supposed to learn about things? How am I supposed to learn if I'm saying or doing something wrong? How am I supposed to learn if, an understanding of some aspect of sex or sexuality has changed if I haven't been able to talk with anybody, if we're not able to publicly talk about it? So just having that opportunity was like, it's great.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy it. And that's what Sexplanations was to me, was the idea of we're publicly going to be talking about this. So everyone can then have the opportunity to say, I didn't know that. Now I can analyze my own beliefs or my own understandings of the world or sex or just interpersonal relationships.
Right.
So for me, there was never really
even in childhood, or
no, I'm just talking about really with you, but like, if we talk about in childhood, like childhood friends, you sort of read who your friends are and what they like to talk about. My best friend in high school is a very religious person, and his father was an actual pastor at their church, and they actually lived on the church grounds. And it is still to this day the nicest family in the world. And they knew that I was an atheist. They never once talked to me about trying to recruit me or anything like that. But I also had respect for them and did not talk about things that I knew would upset them. And if I ever did, which I don't think I did, but if I ever did, I would have immediately apologized, because they understood my boundaries and I understood their boundaries. And I feel like I just take that to everyone I know, sitting down and playing board games is a different social environment than sitting around the table for a meeting. And sitting down and making a video with you is different than sitting around and making a video with Hank. It's just all different. And everybody has different boundaries, and everybody has different things that they're okay talking about. And learning about what those boundaries are, in subtle ways, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't know, it's one of the few things I really love about people, is being able to figure out how they're different.
Oh, yeah.
And what they want. And that I say that, and I'm sure some people might think, that applies to everything. And I think, no, there are times when you have to look at somebody and go, you need to stop what you're doing because this is harmful or whatever. And I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, in very relaxed conversation, what can you talk about with people? And so, yeah, I've just always done that. I've always enjoyed doing that. Like, on a one-on-one basis. I get really flustered if you put me into a large group of people. I find rooms like that very hard to read, and I just end up sort of backing into a corner and look at all the people having fun. And that's sort of my thing. I mean, how have you dealt with that?
Learning to communicate with people in different situations about sex?
Yeah. Like, I mean, where did you struggle with it when you were younger?
I don't think so. I think that with my parents, who were very open about the diversity of human nature in all forms and very accepting of education and seeking knowledge, I was raised in a home that was very permissive. That being said, there was also a religious background to that home, and I grew up thinking that I was going to wait until marriage. And it actually wasn't until I was probably having sex where I was like, I guess I'm not waiting because this feels so good and so right. And I can't imagine a system that would tell me that this is wrong. Or, I know exactly what that system is, but it's not aligned with what I believe now.
Sure.
And so I think, from the beginning, I was able to talk about sexuality. I can remember having conversations with my dad about masturbation, and I was telling him, the guys at school, this was in high school, they were talking about masturbation, and he just talked openly about how, that's okay, and you can masturbate too, and that's very healthy, natural, normal. And my best friend growing up, she was is the daughter of a urologist, and so there was a lot of sexual knowledge there that I could get from her or her parents. And the conversations were pretty easy, I would say, until I started seeking education formally in sexuality. Then there were some trouble areas in college, especially where people would say, oh, like, you're a sexologist. Does that mean you want to have sex with me? And it took me some work, especially in Missoula, Montana, where we are, this small town, to create for people an understanding of what sexology means and a reputation for that wasn't about having sex with everyone who wanted it. It was more about studying it like you would any other discipline and sharing that information with others.
Right.
So as I made more of a space for myself here, I feel like people could look at the career I had chosen accurately and say, oh, yeah, that's Lindsay Doe. She's a sexologist, or that's my, professor in human sexuality. And there was no attachment to certain sexual shaming or taboo.
Sure. No, that's great. I don't have anything else to add there.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that you talked about sex?
Hang on one second. How are we doing on time, guys?
We're at 51 minutes, but there was a lot of.
Well, I mean, for you, how much time did you budget out? I just want to make sure that we're.
I have.
I'm open for the rest of the day, so you know.
3:45.
Okay.
I have to be.
Okay, cool.
They said my hair clips worked well.
Good. All right, sorry. Ask that question again.
When was the first time you talked about sex that you remember?
I don't know. I don't have a crystal clear memory of like an on-off switch.
That's okay.
I don't remember. I had a fairly open childhood in terms of the media that I consumed.
Mm-hmm.
So like growing up, I watched rated R movies, and like it was never, there was never a feeling as though there was media for kids and media for adults in my place. There was once you get into things like pornography. And I do remember the first time seeing a porno magazine. I was living in an apartment complex, and somebody had thrown a bunch of them out in the alley behind the complex, and all of the kids in the complex gathered together to look at this artifact.
How old were you?
Say maybe 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was definitely like, oh, that's a thing. But I had seen naked bodies on, in movies and things like that. So it wasn't something that I was really shielded from, but I think I kind of had been shielded from it as like, this is the sole purpose of that piece of media, is just for eroticism. Like, so I would say that might be the first time I remember seeing something and thinking this is specifically for one thing.
Interesting.
And so say that was probably it. And then in the late 80s, my father and brother owned a video store, and we had a porno section that was cordoned off. And so every once in a while I worked there and I would check out the tape. So I was always, Little Shop of Horrors, things like that. And so, yeah, that was, but yeah, I was never like, and my mother used to get very angry when we watched something on television and they would cut out something that had nudity in it or something. She would get really mad, not because she wanted to see the nudity, but because she felt like if you're going to show the movie, show the movie.
Yeah.
Don't.
Authenticity.
Yeah. She's like, so like Conan the Barbarian was one of the first ones I remember. And there was a lot of nudity in that first film. And, it was very matter of fact. My mother specifically was very good about not shaming people for that, for being, for sex and enjoyment of sex shouldn't be shameful. That was something that she specifically raised me to believe.
Yeah, it rubbed off on you. I like that.
Good.
Thanks, Nick's mom.
Her name is Gloria.
Thanks, Gloria.
So yeah, it was just that sex should never be a shameful thing. It was probably the closest I ever got to having a discussion about sex. Even though we've talked about some of the crap sex education that I've had, I actually did have a fairly decent, I want to say in 7th or 8th grade, we had a bio class where we actually had just a very generic breakdown of sexual reproduction that is still pretty accurate to this day. So I feel like that was where I've probably had the first real solid understanding, maybe. I'm not sure.
Did you learn about the clitoris?
No. Where did I learn about the clitoris?
I really hope it's not from me.
No. No, God, no.
Good. Well done, whoever taught Nick about the clitoris.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably, here's the thing. I learned a lot about the world through movies and television. And I feel like that's fairly common with people in my age range.
Oh, yeah. But even now, 75% of people are getting their sex education from the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, so in 97, I was 20, and that's about when I got the internet at home. And so most of my sex ed happened before that. And
that's how it's doing it.
Your computer.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to figure out how to turn that off. So prior to the internet, most of my sex ed came from little bits and pieces at school, and then just like movies would joke about something. And then, you and your friends would talk about weird shit that you talked about at the time. And, looking back on it now, nobody knew what they were talking about. Even though there were those people that you thought knew what they were talking about. They didn't. They had no freaking clue what they were talking about. So, I mean, I know that there were movies that talked or joked about the clit. There were, but I don't know where I first learned about it.
Me neither.
Yeah. For me or for you?
For me,
oh, okay.
I don't remember learning about the clit. I have no recollection of.
Well, you have one, so.
I do, but it's very hidden and tucked away. And unless you're down there really looking for something, I would not have found it. And for me, I find it or encourage others to by touch, by the sensation of it, not necessarily by the sight of it.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Let me know in the comments of this live stream where you learned about a clitoris for the first time. I do know that I went to a conference, and that is when I first learned about the internal structures of a clitoris and how it is much more than just the tip.
I didn't learn about the internal structure of a clit until you.
Explanations.
Yeah, like that was amazing when you showed me the diagram.
Oh,
I was like, whoa.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I learned a lot on sexplanations. It was great.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're not learning,
then why?
Well, what's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. So anything else we want to talk about before we close? What's your favorite joke?
Oh, my favorite joke? Oh, I don't know. You go first.
You already know my favorite joke.
Is it still your favorite joke?
Well, it's what I would say is my favorite joke.
I don't like jokes.
Okay, what do you like?
Well, I like a good comedian who spins a story. And then so like a joke, is set up, payoff, right? Like set up, payoff. So if you want, here's my current recommendation for people. It's a little dark, but one of the greatest working comedians is Norm Macdonald. And he has a special on Netflix now. I think it's called Hitler's Dog and Other Nonsense or something like that. And his observational humor is exactly what I love in the world. And so, if you check it out, it's called Hitler's Dog and something else. I can't remember what the something else is, but he just goes, he gets to this point about dogs where he's like, your dog thinks you're the greatest person in the world. Hitler had a dog.
Oh.
That dog thought he was the greatest person in the world. He's like, hey, when's Hitler coming home? And it's just sort of putting it into perspective that there are different perspectives on everything. But that particular routine is really great. And I remember first seeing Norm Macdonald he was on A Night at the Improv, which was an old show on cable television, I think on A&E, back in the 80s, that I was immediately taken with this guy. He just had this great dry wit, and yet sort of made you question expectations because he would take things in a different direction. And his talk about the dating game and sex is also really, really fun and funny. Little dark at times, little dark.
I just watched Sarah Silverman's Just a Speck.
I keep hearing about it.
Yeah. She has a whole bit on Roe v. Wade, and yeah, it's good.
Well, she just did a new thing about if it's good for the goose, it's good for, is it good for the goose, it's good for the gander thing about male masturbation in terms of regulating abortion. Well, then.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So she's saying that because sperm have olfactory senses, they have a sense of smell because they can detect where the egg is and then direct themselves.
Mhm.
That is a form of life, and therefore we should regulate masturbation and coitus interruptus, etc. Any ejaculate of sperm that does not go on should be punishable in the same ways as women are being regulated with their abortions. And she talks about putting this tiny little tube up the urethra of the penis and down into the testicles so that you have to look at your sperm, those living beings, and really think about what you're doing before you masturbate. It's wise.
You can't fault the logic, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't like jokes, but I love comedians.
Me too.
I am I'm a comedian connoisseur. And Norm Macdonald, I thought he'd retired from stand-up for a long time because he went on Saturday Night Live, he did a few movies, and then he came back to it. He just did this new special, and it just made my heart so happy to see him there. I will warn you, it is dark though. Like he has some very lighthearted stuff, but he also has some dark stuff that is, but it's also, I find, very, very amusing.
Well, next week we talk about sex shields. Well, next week we talk about sex shields with local comic
John Howard.
John Howard
Was once a student of mine.
and mine.
Yes. And is a really good comedian.
Yes, he's amazing.
Yeah, lovely human being too.
Now you know, John, this is what we think about you. Well,
all right, Lindsay, take us out.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for sharing this time with me. We're not sitting on the red couches, but it's really sweet that you're here and sharing your sexy voice and wisdom and history of the channel with our listeners. What else do you want to say?
Look, I had a great time. Sexplanations will always be something that I love. And for those of you wondering, Lindsay and I still hang out pretty much weekly almost. So,
yeah.
So it's lovely. I've made a lifelong friend out of that. If everything else goes to shit,
we've got each other.
We've got each other at the end of the day. So yeah, I thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here. The tagline can be "Stay curious," but I also like "Ancora imparo," which means still learning.
Ancora imparo.
Ancora imparo, which means I'm still learning.
Ancora imparo.
Yeah.
Hors Dusties. That was for Michael Aranda.
Thanks.
I think we got everything.
All right. Well, thank you for. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, I need to do some quick announcements.
You also need to do more of a proper sign off.
Okay.
Which is going to be, thank you for listening. Check out our YouTube videos that I make with Matt at youtube.com/sexplanations.
Okay.
Make sure and check us out on Patreon again. Make sure you hit the Patreon again, and then your social media. You'll get used to it. Okay. At first it's a struggle, but you'll get used to it.
Okay, here we go.
Do you know how long it took Hank and John? I had to send Hank and John a script finally. So to get all of their social media stuff.
That makes me so happy to hear. I always love when I see Hank and John flopping is not the word, not flopping. Yeah, but like flopping around, they don't get it, and it's just like, my humans are being humans. Okay, thank you all for listening. We've got a few announcements for you. One, Sexplanations, the YouTube channel, just turned 4 years old. Please check out Sexplanations at youtube.com. Also, we have new merchandise on our DFTBA website. If you want to see some of our cool new products, our t-shirts, black t-shirts with rainbow handwriting and red t-shirts with black handwriting, both stay curious.
That shirt looks awesome, by the way.
Thank you. I love it.
It looks really good. So
yes. Also, you can follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Sexplanations, Tumblr, Tumbling Dough, and Twitter is LTD, all spelled out, ELLTEEDEE. And anything else I need to add?
Anything else? Podcast? I don't think so.
We now have a weekly Sexplanations podcast. Please check back in next week. And Cora Amparo.
In Cora Amparo. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Nick. Do you have what you need?
I think so.
Do you need me to redo anything?
I feel like that.
What do you guys think?
I feel
do
like
I
you
need
got
to
a
redo
good
anything?
podcast out of that, and I think it'll just get easier as you go.
Nope. Stop.
We weren't recording the whole time. It was a good test.
Aw, these people are writing such cute things.
Really? What are they saying?
Thanks, Nick's mom.
I'd like to figure out what have you listened to them.
So, Callie, feel free to cut as much as you want
Okay.
and move things around too.
Okay.
Nick and I have the same philosophy here, so I don't mind speaking for him, that as long as the integrity of the sentiment is true, then if you need to manipulate things so they're clearer, then that's a-okay.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, just have fun with it. So much fun. Feel free to use any of the Sexplanations footage you want to.
So are you just wanting like a montage of clips from the first episode in that one space?
Yeah, you could even play like the first 30 seconds if you wanted, because it's kind of montagey.
It is.
Anyway.
Yeah, it is. It is very much a montagey. Yeah, she talks about one thing in one shot, and then we cut across the room to a different shot, and she's talking about something else. So, yeah.
Okay, bye everyone.